Hey folks, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about the Household RPG from our good friends at Two Little Mice over in Italy. Now you might be aware that there's a backer kit campaign going on right now for Volume 2 of Household. You can see this is Volume 1, the Opera Omnia set. In the current campaign you can get all of this, Volume 1, or any parts of it that you like, as well as the Volume 2 set, which expands the realm of Household. So Household is, if you've ever seen the movie The Borrowers or Ariete, it's basically that. You play as very tiny pixies who live in a gigantic house, and in this house there's a whole civilization of different types of fey creatures, and they hold different dominions over different rooms and areas of rooms within the house, and you end up fighting sort of household critters like spiders and centipedes and mice and so on, and it's very adorable in concept. It's got quite a lot of rich lore behind it, and the books are incredibly beautiful with tons of playable material, including a full campaign. And the same is true of part 2. There's going to be, instead of the core rule book, there's going to be a book about the new setting, which is expanding from out with the house into the garden and the roof and lots of other places, and it's going to introduce lots of new professions, vocations, creatures, a new class of colossal creatures, and other things to populate this new part of the household world, as well as a second part of the campaign. I also wanted to give a shout out as well to Two Little Mice, because when my copy of this game first arrived, I was missing the dice and dice bag, so I wrote to one of the creators at Two Little Mice. They arranged to have replacements sent to me, and I got not one set of dice, but two, which was very kind of them. And of course the dice bag as well. And they sent the dice bag all the way from Italy, and the 2 sets of dice from America with the duty already paid. So thanks to them for arranging all of that. I really appreciate how quickly and professionally they handled everything. So anyway, without further ado, we'll take a look at the game itself. So it's very heavy. You get this big old chunky case here, which as you can see looks like a big thick book on your shelf, which is really nice. Got a nice logo here with a keyhole, which is nice given that one of the weapons you can use is various types of keys. And then on the back it says, "For the house is big and these are such small matters." So kind of a little bit of a hint about the game and its vibe. And you can see the dice here. Now this system uses the same director's cut system essentially as Outgunned, which we've looked at before. So if you watch that video, you'll basically get how this game works. You roll your dice, which are all d6s, and you try to get matching sets. And the more matches that you have, so if you have 2 matching dice, it's a basic success, 3 is a critical, 4 is extreme, and then you have impossible with 5. Then the stronger the effect will be of whatever you're trying to do. And different enemies will have different minimums for their defense difficulty that you have to exceed to hit them, for example. And basically it's a player-facing system, so the player characters will roll action rolls and reaction rolls depending on what is happening. If something's happening to them, they'll roll a reaction roll. If they're doing something, they will roll an action roll. The only occasion where the GM will actually roll is going to be during dueling scenes. That's the one exception. And in that case, it's very simple how it's outlined in the core rulebook. Now, when you open the box up, you've got this lovely art here. You can see, if you move things over a little bit, see the outside of the house. You can see it's somewhat in disrepair. Part of the concept here is that the master of the house has departed a long time ago, and so the house is kind of now purely the domain of the fae of various types that live within it. And within the box we have several different books. We have Household Volume 1, which is the core rulebook, Practical Guide to Living Inside the House, which is a setting book, and a Saga of the Fragile Peace, which is the epic campaign. Plus you also get a GM screen, a map, and some other stuff. So we'll start out by tipping everything out of the box. There we go. And one thing I will always say about Two Little Mice games is they're beautifully presented. So we'll look at the supplementary stuff first. So we have here the Caramel Candy Company logo, which you'll see referenced in the game. And then on the other side, we have an atlas of the house. I'm just going to show it sideways here so you can kind of get the overall picture. But basically, you can see that each different room has little cities associated with it. So Beddingham, Clockminster, Rosevault, there's the small bedroom, the Mushroom Thicket. We've got the Great Bowl, which is a kind of semi-aquatic city on the toilet. You've got Tupperdom, which is in the bathtub. You've got Topridge on the top of the stairs. You've got places then on the ground floor, including Walford in the hearth, Cinderhall, the fireplace, Chesterfield, which is under the sofa, Bookshire, the Yule Forest, where the Christmas tree has fallen down, Downridge at the bottom of the staircase, In the kitchen, you've got Glossberg, Ostrivia on the kitchen table, Montguignol, got Ferriev as well in the window. We have the quivering stairs leading down to the basement. We have Umbrol, Veletia, the furnace, the sawdust desert, Al-Sahir, the deep down, and Utu Dasawer. Each of these areas is home to different types of Fae who hold their dominion. There are 4 main types, but the 4th type is actually 3 subtypes. So there's effectively 6 different origins that you can have within the game. And there's a lot of lore concerning how these factions entered the house and the historical timeline of that, when the master left and when they moved in, when the different factions had wars against each other. And right now you're in the Fragile Peace, referred to in the title of the campaign book, where the factions are sort of in an uneasy state of truce. Then we have this lovely landscape-oriented GM screen. So you can see we have all of our reference tables here. We'll look at the imagery first. So, if you're an arachnophobe, you might not be into this game's imagery. There are a lot of spiders in it. So here we see a fairy, which is easily detectable by their wings. We have somebody with a gecko. We have a duelist, perhaps, with a key. So a whole adventuring party fleeing from a gigantic spider of doom, who appears to have a fork stuck in him, various needles, and other instruments that have been chucked at him by the party as they've tried to hunt him down. But yeah, spiders are a big deal in this game. Some of them can give you great things if you manage to befriend them, which is not easy, but it is possible. In the GM screen itself, you have really helpful information. Basically, everything you need to be a GM is here. So a summary of all the conditions that you can get as a character, all the way down to broken, which is when you have more than 3 conditions. So you get an additional -1 to all rolls in that case. It tells you when you get conditions, how to remove them, how help and hindrance works, so characters can help each other, or some characters might get in your way. The ace cards, which are in the card deck that we'll look at in a minute, they can be used to gain a +1 to an action or reaction roll, repeat a move, remove a condition, or change an approach if you failed an action roll. And if you have a joker card, you can get an extreme success automatically without even rolling. You can save a friend who's about to bow out, which is the equivalent of being knocked out of all your hit points. Remove 1 condition of any kind, or replace an ace by playing your joker. So if you want to play your move again, you need an ace, and if you don't have enough, you can use a joker to replace it. Then we got levels of decorum. There's 5 different levels of decorum, which is basically your level of elegance and niceness in Fae society. You can lose decorum 3 different ways, and you can raise it 3 different ways, and there are costs associated with it and rolls as well to move up the decorum track. Then there's the basic mechanic of rolls. So action rolls and reaction rolls are the main 2. You make a dice pool to the sum of your field and skill points that are called into play. There are 4 different fields on the character sheet. Then you can have modifiers as well. So if you have an advantageous situation, maybe you get to roll an extra dice or 2, or you might lose some due to condition or other things. But you can never roll less than 2 or more than 9 dice. And there are rerolls, free rerolls, going all in, which we'll look at later. Basic difficulties, from basic to critical to extreme to impossible. And you can also have multiple difficulties. So you could have a difficulty of critical plus basic, meaning you needed 2 of a kind and a 3 of a kind, and then give you examples of these successes. If you manage to get 6 successes, which is a jackpot, you can fully take control of the game and basically narrate an entire scene. You can also use your extra successes and donate them to other players so they can succeed without a roll. And every higher success is worth 3 of the successes below it. So if you get an impossible, then that's worth 3 extremes. So you could give 2 extreme successes to your friends. You could break those down further into criticals. Failure is not really failure in the conventional sense in this game, nor in Outguns. Basically, there should be a partial success or an unforeseen event. It doesn't stop what you're trying to do in its tracks necessarily. So there could be a negative consequence, success at a cost. Maybe you have to proceed in a different way than you hoped that's less than ideal, or you might suffer some stress, which is your equivalent to hit points-ish. And then they talk about stress, how many stress you get for different types of failures. You can also use successes to avoid damage as well, and how to remove stress, which is actually not difficult, just take some respite. Then how combat works, which is very, very easy, and the difference here from Outgunned is you have the opportunity for weak spots. If you use up a move or make a roll of investigation plus war, then you can find a weak spot, and then the narrator will consult a table and give you a weak spot that you can try to hit to do extra damage. Then they have range combat or shooting and reloading, the use of cover, partial and total, brawl mechanic, so this is fighting between 2 folks in a bar or whatever, and a duel, which is where the challenger will be played by the narrator in this case. And so the narrator will choose a dice pool from 4 to 8, and the narrator can never make any free rerolls. Basically, you try to exceed each other's successes. If you get a better success than the other, then you'll land a jab, and whoever gets 3 jabs loses. That's it for dueling, basically. But yeah, we'll cover more of that as we get into the game proper. But before we do that, we'll take a look at the Aces deck, which has some lovely pieces of artwork on it. Now, aces, as I mentioned, are used in this game to use certain moves. You get a couple at the start of each session based on your moves that you have and your fields of specialty. So you'll see that there's a lot of repeats here because you'll often get more than one depending on what your fields of specialty are. So we have heart, suit, aces here. There are 5 of those. There are 5 of the clubs, and there are 5 of the diamonds, and 5 of the spades, all with their own cool artwork. And then we have jokers. And the jokers are more powerful than aces, generally speaking, because you can get an extreme success for free and stuff like that, or save somebody from bowing out of a scene completely. All of these are intended to be given out as rewards to players for doing cool stuff. The joker is for something really good, like if you do something so cool that the whole table of players cheers or something like that, then you might get a joker. As for the dice themselves, these are nicely engraved. You get a set of 9 of the suited dice. There we go. And then you'll note, so we have these suited dice here, and these are what you roll for your action and reaction rolls. So let's say I have a dice pool of 6, and I'm looking for a critical success. Yeah, not going to work. But what you can do is you can also do re-rolls in the system where you take any dice that didn't have a success, and you can re-roll them. And now I have critical. And then we have a numeric dice, which is uses Roman numerals, which is nice. Adds the vibe of the game a little bit. This the narrator will use. So when you have the players fighting against an opponent, the opponent will have a d6 reaction table, and basically when they attack, you will roll this to determine which entry on the table you'll use, and the players will then have to all roll reaction rolls to deal with the consequences. And then, as I said, the only other time that the narrator will roll is basically if you're doing a duel, and they'll say, this duelist is level 5, and, he's rolled a basic success. And then if your character has a dice pool of 7, and he rolled a critical. So in that case, the player character would score 1 jab and be 1/3 of the way to victory. So the dice mechanics are really easy. The symbols look great. The dice have a nice sort of off-white color, and all the engraved sides look really good. They look like they've been painted with care, put together very nicely. So altogether, very good components for the game. Put those to one side. And we'll start with Household Volume 1. So this is the core book. It's pretty thick. I think it's over 300 pages. It's got lovely sort of spot highlights. You can see there the gold on the top. And I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here because the main goal is just to show you the basic idea of the game, all the great stuff that you find in Volume 1 and how that could be enhanced by Volume 2. So in the content, you'll see we have background of the fairy folk and all the nations, then your character and character sheet, the various professions you can choose, and each profession also has vocations underneath it which allow for further specialization. So there's a lot of possibilities when you're building a character. Then we get the how to play stuff, and then contracts. So this is a fairly low magic system. It's not like D&D where you're spell slinging all over the place. Your special powers are granted by a hereditary contract. So depending on which kind of folk you are, you will get a hereditary contract. So the fairy, for example, will get wings. But you can also make personal contracts with other beings. But if you violate the contract, then bad things will happen to you. And the more violations that you do, the more terrible things will happen. There's also welcoming contracts that may have to sign to enter certain realms. Then we got equipment, a history of the household, a saga, so basically how you put together a long-running storyline, then a basic background of the house, much less than the practical guide to living inside the house, the second volume in the set, but still more than enough to start play. And then the appendix, you have special traits that opponents can have, weak spots, and a list of key opponents. And then you have an intro adventure called Pride and Prejudice and Centipedes, which is a great title. So there's a bit of a preface. This book is written in kind of a semi-first-person style, as if somebody is writing a history of the household. They start out with introduction to what the household role-playing game is. So typical adventures could be investigating the disappearance of a precious bumblebee, taking part in a great ball on the chandelier, which is where fairies live, exploring the lair of a spider, crossing a long hallway and facing its pitfalls, or going on a mission for the Sultan of Piping. They also talk about tiny meters, the equivalent of a meter for a tiny person. And the height of these folk is deliberately kept a little bit vague, and tiny meters are kind of a rough unit of measurement, and the game is fairly narrative in character, so it's not that important. You need to know just range bands rather than specific numbers of tiny meters. And they talk about the basics of how to play, and then we've got a lovely 2-pager here, and they always give you a little nice note here. So this is a fresco painted inside the piano in Blackshine. Somebody writing having a mouse and a number of other knights charging in here, and this poor sap standing on these wood beams ready to get toppled. Then we have the actual book, so we can see that it's curated by Erasmo J. Hemingway, with original illustrations and fine reproductions by Mr. Julian Bilbinski. And so this is meant to be an actual book written about the household. So they introduce you to who the author is, a little bit of the history of the household, the game in a nutshell. And then we jump right into folk and nations. And there's little bits of in-world fiction or poetry between each chapter as well, which is nice. So first, folk and nations. The origins of little folk are a bit nebulous, but they give you some background in that. Some setting preconceptions and, where your preconceptions of the Fae might hold and where they might not. And then we get right into the different types of folk. So first we have fairies, who are the ancient Fae folk, and mostly known today as the fairy folk. They're known most for their beauty, grace, and exquisite proportions. They also have charming wings like those of conceited dragonfly made of shiny see-through membrane. It takes on many different shades. Talks about their culture, their population in the house, and you can see references to the first household war, all these different historical events that have happened in the household. The languages they speak and the types of names they use. So they have their own language, but there also is a house-wide lingua franca that everybody can speak as well. So if you're traveling between realms, you'll generally be able to communicate with everybody. And then their hereditary contract is their beautiful wings, which allows them to fly, and they talk more about that when you get into the mechanics of the game. Their kingdom, if you like, is called the Realm. So the lands of the Realm include the dining hall and the kitchen, and they're mostly inhabited by the fairies. And the capital is Ostravia, which is a crystal city founded on the highlight chandelier, so up high in the sky. And there's interesting little notes here for all of the folk about their daily lives, like because fairies can fly, they often have the entrance to their home on the 3rd or 4th floor, for example, which is just a neat little detail. Talk about their customs and traditions, their armed forces, which is important in the longer term campaigns, and what it's like to move to the realm if you're from one of the other backgrounds as well, which is really nice. So it helps you to understand what it'd be like to be an immigrant to the fairy realm. Then we have the boggarts. So they were the first little folk to step into the house back when the master and his family still inhabited the house itself. Boggarts, they're generally tall, sturdy, and burly in build. Their features are kind but a bit angular. Women don't usually wear any makeup, and updos are common for older women. They've got a culture that doesn't care much for formalities and strict rules, so very much in opposition to the fairy, who love being pretentious, basically. Here we see a boggart shroom cutter. He just proudly chopped down this mushroom with this key. Boggart folk have a language called Hearthish, a simple and direct language, much like the folk who created it, but they also speak the house-wide language as well. Their hereditary contract is dear to the hearth, so they get unparalleled strength, typical of their folk, and the ability to focus it, growing up to twice their size for short periods. And that's called going juggernaut. And their home is in the hearth. Hearth territories extend from the living room to most of the stair side and are mainly inhabited by the boggarts. The official capital is Walford, the borough. Many see the tiny city of Cinderhall inside the fireplace as the core of the nation, as it has great historical and spiritual significance for the folk as a whole. Then we get into their customs and traditions, their armed forces, what it's like to be an immigrant to the hearth, and a lovely little image here of a young boggart woman with a leaf bonnet. How adorable is that? Carrying a big spoon, a little pincushion, and a key there as well, presumably for self-defense, digging, cutting things, that kind of stuff. The illustrations are outdone mostly by the single artist. They're incredible quality. I mean, the book's layout as well is beautiful. So we have the sprites. Now, the sprites are the ones I mentioned before, who are actually divided into 3 different sub-ancestries, which are linked with water, air, or fire that are considered the main forces present within the house. Air-linked sprites are called sylphs, the water-linked sprites are called undines, and the fire-linked sprites are called salamanders. And they are each slightly different in their ways. So each sylph comes out of the draft, and they get the gift of bloating, which we'll see later on how that works. And the salamander gets out of the spark, and the gift of enlightenment. The undine also as well, they have out of the drain, which gives them the gift of water retention. Now their kingdom is called the Free Dominions, known to many as the Freedomes. It's a confederation that includes the lands of the master bedroom, the bathroom, and the smaller bedroom. The capital is Beddingham, universally famous for its sprawling market, but Tubbardom is the hub of political life. So that's the city floating in the bathtub. Of course, they have their own language and culture, traditions, their armed forces, and the experience of being an immigrant in the Free Dominions. And here we have an undine who is at work working on some pipes and using a hairpin of some kind to do something. And she's shouting at somebody who's being lazy, really. The Slua, so they arrived in the house many years after the master disappeared. They seem to have come from a place that nobody even remembers, and they call it the Far Beyond. So it's sort of way back in the mist of ancient time, where they originated from. And they're very heterogeneous is one of their main qualities. So some of them could be really tall, some of them are slender, some of them, are totally different colors from each other. They very rarely adhere to common proportions and standards of beauty. So if you want to be a bit quirky, then perhaps being a Slua is for you. Their culture is really complex and different from that of other folks, so they tend to have diplomatic difficulties with other folk, and they're extremely populous as well. So they're a very varied nation, and here we see a great sampling of very strikingly different looking people who are all part of the Slua nation. Here we have a Slua wearing traditional Horde clothing. So the Horde is their nation, if you like, which has this emblem here. And they're also known as the Lower Dominions or House Below. The capital is Al-Sahir, the ruined city, which is also the most populated city of the household. So there are a lot of Slua, but they live in the less sort of glamorous parts of the house, down in the basement, where you'll find lots of dangerous things and areas like spiders and centipedes and all that kind of stuff. Their hereditary contract is revenant from far beyond, so it's a kind of ancient power that they gained from their long journey into the house from the far beyond. So by the power of the contract, they become unbleeding and gain the extraordinary ability to heal even mortal wounds. So that made them fearsome warriors. And then we have their customs and traditions, their armed forces, the life of an immigrant to House Below. And here we have a picture of a Slua with her spinning top. Again, we see the heterogeneity and the diversity of the Slua population. Now we have creating your character and using the character sheets. So creating a character is pretty simple, much like Outgunned, just a few steps you need to follow. So you choose a name, choose a folk, note your hereditary contract. You choose a nation of origin, so you could be a fairy who lives in the house below, for example. You don't have to be in the same nation from which your folk rule. Then you choose a profession, followed by a vocation, which is a subfield of your profession. Then you note your field and skill points. According to those, add 4 skill points wherever you want. Choose your traits and moves from your options available through your profession and vocation. Note the aces up your sleeve that you have at the beginning of each session. Note your wealth and equipment. You get baseline of a certain number of coins to buy equipment with as well. Note your level of decorum. Write your prologue, which is your kind of short backstory of your character. 1 memory, and choose which languages you know. You have 6 different professions: soldier, scholar, hunter, criminal, duelist, and animal handler, and each has 6 vocations underneath it. So they give an example. If you're a soldier, you could choose from the list of vocations to become a gendarme or a scissor for hire. If you're a scholar, you could choose to become a diplomat or a detective, and so on. Your vocation will give you access to an additional trait that you can put in your list, which is kind of like a feat given to you by that vocation. Profession and vocation determine the points you have in each field and skill on your sheet. And I'll show you a sample of a character here, so you can get a better picture of how these things work. So here we have a fully filled out character sheet. This is for Hannah Arcadia Blaum. She's a fairy from the realm. Her profession is animal handler, and she's got a bumblebee there, you can see. Very cuddly in this universe. And her vocation is veterinarian, so she's particularly good at dealing with her animal companion. She speaks the languages of Halcyon, which is the general house dialect, Fey, and Slugan. So she speaks her own folk's language and the Sluan language as well. She has a memory of a bond. Bonbon and I are inseparable. Bonbon being her bumblebee, and the bumblebee gives her in turn her traits, because animal handlers get their traits and moves from their chosen animal. And so her pet bumblebee gives her a free reroll whenever she rolls to hit from a distance with the bumblebee. If there's anything sweet nearby, however, roll a die. If the result is a heart, then the bumblebee will ignore whatever you ordered it to do and fly to eat the sweet thing. It also has the trait of cute little antennae, so thanks to your bumblebee, you always have a free reroll when rolling to charm or make good impressions on others. In fact, where she has a great deal of power is in the society and academia areas, so she's good at dealing with grace, etiquette, eloquence, care, insight, investigation, and academia. Got some decent skills in war and street, but the fields themselves are lower than society and academia. And for equipment, she's got her bumblebee and bumblebee gloves, which allow her to handle a bumblebee without causing it stress or harm. Her contract, she has wings, which is what the hereditary contracts for fairies, so she can fly. However, when she's flying, she suffers a -1 when trying to dodge projectiles and when attempting to be stealthy. The flip side of that contract is name. That means that all fairies are bound to honor agreements they undersign with their name, and if you don't, then terrible, terrible things will happen. So there you go. They leave the prologue and experiences for you to fill in as you play. So that's the basics of how your character is built. And from here onwards, then, there's a lot of detail. They tell you about how to mark down your decorum, your stress and conditions, your contracts, your prologue, and what to do with that, experiences and memories. So your character will know at least 2 languages, plus the language of their host nation. If you have 2 points in academia, you gain a 3rd language as well. So that was the case with our bumblebee handler there. Then we get into the professions. So another beautiful illustration here. We have from left to right, top to bottom, Dimitri, a fairy, Ira, an Undine, Tubo, a Slua, and Gemma, a Boggart. Now the soldier profession. So each profession will tell you which field you gain a point in and give you a trait, which in this case is Master at Arms, which is referenced later. Choose one move from this list: Bodyguard, Defensive Stance, Endure Pain, or Power Through. And you can add skill points to the fields listed below. And then possible soldier moves are described here, along with the suits that you need to spend as far as aces to make that move happen. And then there are 6 vocations. And the vocations then are listed much like Outgunned. So under soldier, you could be a cadet, which gives you a focus on society, a guardian, which is society as well. First class, which gives you an academic focus. Gendarme also gives you academia, as does officer. So here you're more learned, and a citizen for hire means you're kind of a mercenary type, and so you get a point in street. And you get different traits, as you can see as well, and new skill point adding possibilities for each vocation. Then we have our scholars, so they're your intellectuals, and here we see a few examples. Gwen, a Boggart, Malaika, a Slua, Pierre, a fairy, and Aiden, a salamander. So the scholars focus, of course, on academia as their main field. Their trait is know-it-all, which makes sense, and most of their moves as well are about investigation or learning things. As you can see here, they have names like attention to detail, do you know who I am, fast learning, tinker, friends in high places, outsmart, kind of things that you'd imagine scholarly people to do. And there's a number of cool vocations below that. So an artist will give you some points in society. So you use your intelligence and creativity. With diplomat, you gain society and you're more insightful into things like etiquette and grace and things like that. And your traits are more about being well-mannered and being good at mediating disputes. Researchers, you'll be better at researching, investigating things, and better at finding pathways. Then you have the doctor, will have a field point in war, and they are helpful in medicine and surgery. Then you have your detective, who gets a point in street, and they're of course best for investigations. And they're among the most celebrated scholars in the house, apparently. And then we have scientists, who also have a point in street. The mechanics, engineers, botanists, clockmakers, and alchemists and stuff, who make all kinds of cool new things. Pretty useful skill points if you want to make stuff or find stuff out. We got our hunters. So these are the brave folk that go out into the wilds of the house and try to protect others from the craziness that happens in between the settlements. And they also will protect, for example, trade caravans that will be traveling from one place to the next. And there are some that work as freelance hunters, and some police forces have rangers that do this kind of duty, and some are poachers and do bad things to those trading caravans and stuff. And there are, of course, guides who have the skills necessary to not only protect but also help people to reach their destination when they're traveling through the wilds. So the hunter is a street-based profession. That's their main field, with a trait of sharpshooter, and they tend to be your long-range combat type. So their moves reflect that, with things like fast reload, take cover, sharp eye, etc. Here we have some lovely example characters again. Icarus, a fairy, Kamat, a Slua, Humphrey, a Boggart, and Litha, a salamander. Looks very surprised looking at her map, which is also written on the back of a caramel wrapper like ours was. Then we've got the 6 subfields. So the guide, get some points in society, and you're better at finding your way along through Pathfinder traits, being alert. Champions, they're brave, they're big and strong, they can be beastmasters. They're lovable braggarts who fill the tavern with their hunting trophies. You've got nomads, they're the clever types, so they get a point in academia and some useful traits and skill points to help them be mobile in their lifestyle. Then we have the scout. So they're alert and quiet. They have a point in war, so they're really good at using their ranged weaponry. The lone mouse. So these are hunters that care only about the hunt, and they might work for themselves. They can be hired as mercs or work for private clients, and most of them tend to be the detached loner types. We've got the bounty hunters, again with a point in war. They prefer to hunt littlings who have broken the law and gain rewards for all of that, and they have traits and skill points that can reflect that capability. Then we have our criminals. How cool is that? Really flavorful character portraits here. We have Jocelyn, who is a fairy. We have Sienna, a Boggart, Micah, a Slua, and Gunther, a Sylph. These are the swindlers, dodgers, and scammers of all sorts. And so their specialty field is street, with the trait of shadow, and they have some really cool moves. But as a criminal, you're generally not going to be that well regarded by society. And of course, other criminals may try to take you out for various and sundry different reasons. The criminal moves are really like, one of them is particularly great, Jack of all trades, gain +1 to your next roll. It's a nice little reference to Traveler as well, which has a similar, really awesome skill with the same name. You can learn from your mistakes, you can ambush people, you can hide weapons, do sleight of hand. Lots of criminal things that are useful for stealing, swiping, or backstabbing. Then we've got the courtesan, who is a vocation that focuses on society. So you'll take any measures you need to advance in society. The cheater, they are often lying for a job. They kind of charm people out of their money. The thief, they have a point in academia, and they'll have skills in pickpocketing, picking locks, or being an acrobat. So they're the classic roguish thief of physical objects, trying to gain some riches. You got the professional criminal, so they have a point in academia as well, but they'll be more into higher level crime like building or counterfeiting stuff, doctors without licensing, things like that. And we have the snitch. These are with the law enforcement and try to infiltrate the criminal world. So they have an academia field point. Their talents involve lying or having a sixth sense for when things go wrong. We have the thug with a point in war, and they tend to be tough as well. So while they have benefits of the criminal lifestyle, they tend to use physical beatdowns to get what they want. Then we have the duelists. This is a unique mechanic that this game has over Outgunned. The duelists are the keeper of an ancient art of dueling, and there are different types of weapons for each of the different folk that they prefer. So we can see in the picture, we've got Shaban, a sylph, Ernest, a boggart, Yulia, a fairy, and Santiago, a slua, all different types of duelists. They are benefiting from a field point in war, the trait of sword fighter, and one move, which will all have to do with cool duelist stuff like cunning tactics, on guard, riposte, feinting, making a fancy entrance, which is pretty cool, or having a vendetta against an opponent, which is pretty fun. They got interesting vocation as well. So the libertine, so they're very gallant and charismatic fencers. Their elegance stands out on the battlefield and in the ballroom. So they get points in society for that and related skills. The heroes, so wherever there's bad stuff going down, the hero will try and jump in and stop it. So they get a point in society for that, and they can choose traits like Braveheart, Natural Born Leader, or Selfless. The virtuosos, they are still in society, but they are master sword fighters. So they get additional traits that relate to being gifted sword fighters like Acrobat, Panache. You have the captain, so they're expert duelists who lead their littlings with strength and determination. Some have been forged in, excellent academies of war fighting and dueling, and they gain a point in academia and have traits about toughness and leadership. The swashbuckler gains a point in street and has traits in acrobat, panache, or nail thrower. So swashbucklers are adventurers. Finally, we have the rebel, again with a point in street. They can be well trained from the gutter or selfless, so they're trying to fight the rich and powerful and stand on the side of the people. Very cool. Then we got your animal handlers. So this is the more complex class in a sense, but none of them are really complicated. But the basic idea of the animal handlers is that they're deeply bonded with wild creatures that live in the house, and they like to explore the wildlands and defend the general population from aggressive beasts. And they devote their lives to rearing, looking after, training, and taking care of animals and insects around the house. So they gain a field point in society. They have the trait Animal Companion, which gives them an animal companion as a secondary character that can act independently for small or simple actions. They can also ride these animals to give them certain benefits. The move that they get will be chosen in accordance with the animal companion they choose. Here we have a picture of several different animal handlers. We've got a slua with a beetle companion, fairy with a bumblebee companion, a boggart with a mouse companion, and Priscilla and Undine with a gecko companion. And those are the 4 options in the main book. There's also some additional options, which we'll see later on. So the animal companion has a dedicated set of traits and moves, so you'll need to look through those, and you don't get profession-specific moves, but you can learn moves for your animal companion by choosing from their list as you advance the character. Then we have some 6 vocations, of course, for the different sub-areas of being an animal handler. So a veterinarian has points in academia. They can have the trait of physician, kind soul, or one trait of your animal companion. And basically, they're the best known and loved animal handlers, and they take care of animals and creatures. We have the aristocrats. They gain points in academia, well-mannered, polyglot, or one trait of their animal. Often, many nobles have a trusted pet as their best friend, someone who just loves them for who they are and who they know will not be a pretender. We have ranchers who have a point in war. They can be big and strong, have pathfinder, or one more animal companion trait. They tend to toil and sweat to herd livestock and keep them safe from wild beasts, and their trusted friend will help them to do so. And we have the trainer, again with points in war. They tend to be tough as nail, brave heart, or they can gain another animal companion trait. And every army of the household includes at least 1 battalion made up of highly trained animals and their handlers. So this is what the trainers are best used for. We've got street performers. They get a point in street, and they can be gifted performers, acrobats, or gain an animal companion trait. These tend to be buskers, artists, acrobats, and roaming musicians, and their fun pet is their kind of beautiful assistant. Then we have traveling merchants with a point in street. Again, they can be mediators, perfect liars, or get an animal companion trait. And they're what it says on the tin. They roam about the house with their wares and and try to sell stuff. Some have worthless junk, some have real treasures, but they all travel with an animal, usually a large one, to help them get through the wilds. Then we got pages for the different creatures, which are really fun. Each creature has an animal companion trait, which you'll get as the animal handler of that creature. So for example, the beetle, you'll note that it's helpful when you want to climb or break down objects. It means they give you a bonus when you want to climb or break something. And when you work together to attack or defend from an opponent, you get a free reroll. If you roll a club, the beetle will ignore all orders and charge head down to defend you. And then they have various different traits that you can choose, and their moves as well. So choose among these moves if you choose to be a beetle handler. And they have thematically appropriate moves like higher endurance, flying charge, smashing, and ironclad resistance. You got the bumblebees, a very fluffy one with a little bow, just adorable. So they're considered the ultimate emblem of beauty and elegance. Wonderful animal companions. They're helpful in your balance or to retrieve small items, and you can hit targets within short range as you would with a thrown weapon. You also get a free reroll when you roll to hit from a distance with your bumblebee, and then you have the downside I mentioned before where they can go after sweet things if you roll badly. Their traits involve a little bit of cuteness, a little bit of scariness. They can get scary jaws as well as cute antennae or a sharp sting, and their bumblebee moves are again thematically appropriate. You have cuteness overload, flying help, fly like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Really, really clever names for all this stuff. The geckos, they're helpful when you want to distract, grab, or hide small objects or cheat at games. So they're sneaky types. And this one's got a little fez and a jacket. How cute is that? And he's named Jimmy, apparently. These ones get a free reroll when you try to steal something. If there's anything shiny, roll a die. If the result is a spade, the gecko will ignore all orders and run to steal and hide the object in his mouth. You can get different traits for the gecko, like extendable tongues, camouflage skin, or prehensile tail, and appropriate moves like grabbing stuff, drawing attention, snitching, cheap tricks, stuff like that. And you got the adorable mouse. Look how cute he is with his little bandana. Chispata, a small mouse. They're helpful to follow trails, recover items, and find help. They get a free reroll whenever you and your mouse work together to find or follow a trail, and they never disobey their handler orders. They're completely loyal. How cute is that? Lovely little traits you can choose, including the saddle mouse, which allows them to be big enough to be mounted, and some mouse moves like licking wounds, protecting, slashing beasts, or warning of danger. Very useful companions and, of course, very loyal. And then we have the details of the different professional traits: Master at Arms, Know-It-All, Sharpshooter, Sword Fighter, Shadow, and Animal Companion, which we just went through. Free rerolls for your chosen weapon if you're a Master at Arms. Free rerolls for remembering information about the house or its history or famous littlings if you're a scholar. Free rerolls for your firearm if you're a sharpshooter. And you begin Chapter 1, your game, with a free firearm or ranged weapon of your choice. Sword Fighter, you choose a dueling weapon and get a free reroll for all rolls that involve your chosen weapon, and for all reaction rolls in combat, and you get a free weapon of your choice. If you're a criminal, you get Shadow, gain a free reroll whenever you're trying to hide, sneak, or tail someone through the city. And then your animal companions, of course, to have their individual traits and moves. And then we have a list of all the traits. Gaining traits, basically, as you move through the game, then you can gain traits that are beyond just your profession. And in the advancement phase, your characters cannot gain new profession-specific traits, but you can freely choose from the list here. And then we get into the how to play. So character creation, not too difficult. They talk about the dice. You can, in theory, use regular old D6s for these, but I think the dice are really cute and look really nice. And, if you get the Omnia set in the current backer kit campaign, you'll get them for free anyway. So you might as well enjoy that. They give some definitions of basic game terms and the two types of dice rolls. So action rolls, so you state you're the one who's doing the action. You can freely choose the field and skill that you'll use. And a reaction roll, the narrator will ask you to react to a specific event and tell you to roll a specific field and skill to make your dice pool. So they talk about action rolls and how you approach them. So basically, the player will state what they want to do and explain their approach. The narrator will determine how difficult the roll is. So, here we have a nice illustration of the difficulties as discussed before. So we have a basic, critical, extreme, and impossible, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of a kind, respectively. And the rarely seen jackpot, where you can just narrate the rest of the scene however the hell you want. Once the narrator determines difficulty, you then add up the dice from your field and skill that have been chosen. You add any modifiers, which will add or subtract dice from your pool. Then you'll roll the dice and tally up your successes, and then depending on what happens, you'll get your consequences. So the goal, they tell you how to determine that in a given situation, and your approach. If you determine your approach carefully, you can basically pick and choose which of your fields you want to use. So they give examples of how you might do that. So if you want to search, you might roll investigation plus academia. Seduction, you might roll charm plus society, that kind of thing. Then we have the explanation of difficulty, which of course we know all about. Critical tends tends to be where a lot of stuff happens in this game. You're often looking for 3 of a kind. Extreme is rare, and impossible tasks should be assigned to the players that they really need to watch their butts, because they should be very scared to have to try and achieve a success of that level. And they talk about building your dice pool. So they give an example of, if you're making an action roll with eloquence and society, so every point you have in eloquence plus every point you have in society will be added together to make up your dice pool. Then positive or negative circumstances, traits, aces, conditions, or equipment can modify all that stuff. But again, you can never roll more than 9 or less than 2 dice. Then reroll. So if you have rolled at least one success, at least a basic with your dice, you can choose to reroll. So it drastically increases your chances of success. When you reroll, you take all the dice that you didn't get a success with and roll them again. And you can't choose which to keep in reroll. You always have to keep all dice that are part of a success and reroll all the others. So if you score better or additional success, then the risk paid off. If you did not result in a better or additional success, you lose one of the successes from your initial roll. You choose which. So that's the downside. You can also get free rerolls. Basically, it has 2 important advantages. You never risk losing your initial successes. So if you roll your reroll and nothing better comes up, you keep your original success, no problem. And you can make a free reroll even if you got no successes at all. All in. So if you do a free reroll or a reroll and you got a better result, you can still choose to go all in. That means you roll again all dice that weren't part of a success, just as you would with a reroll. And if you manage to get a better or extra success, that becomes your new result. However, if you don't get anything better or an extra success, you lose everything. So you have a terrible failure, no successes at all. So that's a big risk. Talk about modifiers. So any positive modifier, +1 will, for example, will add a die to your pool. Negative will subtract them. The narrator can grant you +1s whenever you act keenly or in favorable circumstances, up to +3 maximum. They can also impose minuses for adverse circumstances, up to a total -3. You can also raise the stakes. Even if you scored a success, the narrator could say, well, you know what? Let's raise the stakes. If you re-roll and get a better result, then maybe you get something extra. And then talk about failure, which they underline here is a different path to success. So they don't want failure in this game to stop the story in its tracks. Failure is basically success at a cost, or success with negative consequences, or an unexpected path to success, or it could be a success but it stressed you out. And good narrators should always make sure that a failure doesn't stop the story in its tracks at any point. You can also take extra successes and use them to buy extra actions on your turn. Giving away successes, as I mentioned before, you can give away successes to your ally and they can use that instead of rolling dice. So for example, if you have a basic difficulty action roll and you get 2 successes, you could keep one for yourself and give the second to your friend. Reaction rolls, then the narrator will tell you who needs to react and what you need to roll for your dice pool. Generally, all players involved in an event will have to make a reaction roll, but there might be events that only affect 1 or 2 players. But if you're fighting a big monster or something, it will affect everybody. In the reaction roll context, the goal is always established by the narrator, and they determine the approach. Depending on the situation, the narrator will call for a reaction roll based on what's going on, and they'll have, of course, the usual 4 difficulty levels, but they don't have to disclose difficulty level before you roll. Bear that in mind. Same is true of action rolls, in fact. If you fail a reaction roll, then there will be consequences. You can have an accident. You might end up in an unpleasant situation. You might have a price to pay, which would be losing coins, decorum, or equipment, or gaining a condition. You could get yourself into danger, so you draw the attention of a fearsome opponent, for example, or you could suffer stress, and in particular in combat. Then we have stress. So this keeps track of your current physical and emotional condition. To show you an example of stress, here we have Salamander and an Undyne about to fall into the trap of a huntsman spider, which is gigantic. I mean, in real life, they're terrifyingly huge for actual humans. So just imagine if you were, 2 inches tall. It wouldn't be great. So when you suffer stress, it will depend on the difficulty of the action or reaction roll that you failed. So a basic failure, you get 1 stress for that. Critical failure 3, extreme failure 9, an impossible failure, you fill in all stress boxes and you're overstressed immediately. If you're overstressed, if at any point you suffer more stress, you'll then have to bow out until the next chapter, and only a friend with a joker can save you. But generally, you try to bring characters back to play fairly quickly. You can also use successes that were not good enough to do damage control. So if you were possibly going to end up with 9 stress for failing an extreme difficulty roll, but you rolled a critical success, you could use that to avoid 3 stress. Basic success would reduce that by 1. And there are various ways of removing stress. So a long rest or a lovely meal, a moment's respite. So after the end of a scene, you can refresh your stress, and at the end of a paragraph. So this is kind of like a session of play, basically. The 8th box, called the crucial box, when you fill that, then that means you get a condition. The type of condition that you get will depend depend on the field of the roll that you failed that causes you to fill in the crucial box. And some abilities will trigger upon reaching the crucial box. So hard to kill, for example, after you hit the crucial box, you gain +1 to your next action or reaction roll. Bowing out means your character can't continue with the others in the story. So you could be caught, captured, stuck in a spider's web. Basically, you want to try and get them to return to the scene, either by playing a joker, or you can speak to the narrator how to return on the scene at the beginning of the next chapter. Somebody helped you out of the spider's web, or the prison that you got stuck in, or maybe you made a miraculous recovery from your injuries, fighting with the centipede or whatever. Then we have the breakdowns of the different fields and the skills within them. So in society, you have art, charm, eloquence, etiquette, grace, and other skills as well. And the same goes for the other fields. So for academia, we have care, craft, culture, insight, and investigation, and then a list of useful combinations with other skills. War, we have athletics, authority, fight, strength, and will, and some useful combinations elsewhere. And street, we have caution, dexterity, illusion, not in the sense of illusion, but illusion, so kind of evasion, and exploration and shoot, which is using ranged weapons and firearms, and of course some combination skills. Then we have moves, so each profession will get a move at the start, and you get additional moves at chapters 2 and 4 in your character advancement. So these moves will allow you to take specific action without rolling the dice. You can use every move at your disposal once per session, and you mark a circle next to that move on your sheet, and at the end of a session you erase all the marks. If you want to repeat a move you've already used, then you play an ace, which are the cards that we saw earlier. And as mentioned on the GM screen, ace can give you a +1 to a roll, repeat a move, remove a condition, or change your approach after failing an action roll. You can only spend an ace to gain +1 if you're using a field or skill from the same suit. The same goes for moves. It needs to be the same suit as the move requires. To gain an ace, there are rewards that the narrator will give out. If you score a success that's really difficult, if you have a great idea that changes the story, if you have really memorable actions that you take, you masterfully role play, you do something amazing in an epic scene, you'll get an ace. If you get a joker as a reward, then that means you've done something really spectacular, because the jokers give you an automatic extreme success. You can save a friend who is about to bow out, remove one condition of any kind, or replace an ace. If an ace isn't enough of a reward to satisfy you for what the player did, they give them the joker instead. They are powerful resources though, so if nobody at the table has a joker, you should try and give one out at some point, but if half of them already have one, then you can probably be more sparing with it. Then we have help and hindrance. So these are things that we've seen already, for example, with the animal companions. Help means that you can get a +1 to an action or reaction roll. You can gain a success without rolling the dice, or gain the requirements to make an action roll that you wouldn't normally be able to make. If you're in doubt about how to use help in a scene, then just grant a +1 to a die roll and leave it to chance. Hindrance is basically the opposite. If you are, say, bound in cuffs or something like that, or if you are trapped in some way, you might suffer a hindrance to movement or other things. If you are in a social situation and you look disgusting, you'll get a hindrance for that, and that gives you a -1. You can get a failure without rolling the dice at all, or you might need additional help to have the requirements to make a roll that you need to make. So help and hindrance are both available. When we talk about secondary characters, they can provide help in certain circumstances, or hindrance depending on how they're behaving in the scene. Animal companions, of course, are available to provide help and hindrance in the fields noted in their specific description. They're instead played by the character who controls them, whereas secondary characters are played by the game master. They give some great examples of useful non-player characters, like the trusted butler, the expert guide, the scared child, the reckless noble, etc. Then we get into conflicts. So these are the various ways you can enter opposing somebody else in the game, and there's different ways to do that. So extended roles are for things like chases, playing games against someone, complex surgeries or repairs, try and get a bunch of successes cumulatively, and there's several ways to do it. So you can gain cumulative successes over a certain number of rolls. You can get consecutive successes during, a chase or something like that. Multiple successes, so you need multiple successes in the same roll. You can do a best of 3, where you need to make 3 rolls and pass at least 2 of them. And the strike method, so you can only fail 1, 2, or 3 times. And that's for situations where failure could be really difficult. So if you're trying to navigate through a bunch of sleeping spiders, then that's really dangerous if you make a mistake. So then you would use the strike method. And there's combat. So this is actually very similar to Outgunned. Your opponents will have a name, soldiers or wasps. They'll have a level of difficulty in general. They'll have a set number of stress boxes, and when they fill that, they're defeated. And they have an action, which is the D6 table I referred to earlier. They'll have traits that give them benefits or special abilities, and they'll have moves that they can take when they reach a crucial box. So here, for example, we have a rat, a critical opponent, which means means the base level to hit or avoid it is critical. They have 2 crucial boxes on their stress track here, and when they hit those, they can use their moves, which are Tail Whip, and then Rage the second time, and they're described down here. Tail Whip can knock people over if they don't pass critical reaction roll in Rage plus War, and Rage, the characters have -1 to all action rolls when they attack because the rat is scary. And when the rat acts, they have these 6 actions, and you'll roll the numeric die as the narrator to choose what they actually do, and it'll tell you how the player characters should react. So initiative, it's a side-based initiative system, and it should be sort of narratively determined. You know, if you have the jump on an enemy and you decide to attack first, then obviously you have initiative. If the opponents are waiting in ambush, then they would have the initiative. You can roll a numeric die, and odd means that you get an action turn, so the players go first. If it's even, then it's a reaction turn, and the players are getting attacked first. In either case, the players act and react simultaneously, so there's not an individual initiative as in D&D or anything like that. So there are very different ways of doing attacks, not necessarily always the same roll. So for example, if you want to use a Great Scissor to strike somebody, you can roll Fight plus War. But if you want to use a feint, you could use Dexterity plus War to try and get them off guard. If you want to collapse a bit of building on top of them, you could use Craft plus War. And if you get a success, you'll score 1 stress, and you can get extra successes to either do more actions, more attacks, or do more stress in damage. So pretty straightforward. And on the reaction turn, you will have to roll, as the narrator tells you, to basically defend against the opponent's attack. If you fail, then you'll get an amount of stress determined by the opponent's difficulty rating. If you have extra successes, you can use them to counterattack and deal stress, defend a friend, or take extra actions, and you can also use them for damage control if you need to. All reaction rolls during a combat scene will use the war field and have a difficulty level equal to the opponent's difficulty. Victory and defeat, of course, there's no shame in just running away from combat. However, some moves that opponents have might inhibit your ability to leave combat because you'll be entangled. Winning a combat would be basically defeating your opponent by reducing their stress or causing them to run away at a certain point, or perhaps overwhelming the opponent if they are small but numerous. If you kill a bunch of them, maybe the rest will run away. They also talk about dealing with multiple opponents. A group of characters will face only one opponent at a time, and if there's more than one opponent, the characters will face the strongest opponent first, and the weaker opponent will be a hindrance if that seems relevant. Alternatively, you can split the characters and have them face an opponent each, for example. Weak spots, so if you do the investigation plus war to study your opponent, and you get a success equal to the opponent's difficulty, you'll find a weak spot. When you hit a weak spot, you will do additional stress during your attacks to that spot. And there are different weak spots on a table in the back of the book for the GM to use. Attacking at a distance, you don't have to necessarily be included in a reaction turn if you're shooting from far away. That'll depend on the size of the monster. The possibility of hitting one of your allies means you always have a hindrance whenever you shoot from a distance. And then you've got shooting rules, so you get different levels of hindrances when you are shooting from longer range. And if something is out of range, you just simply can't shoot at it. Reloading takes a whole turn. Weapons in the household are single shot, so you have to alternate between shooting and reloading, but you do have some moves that can allow for fast reloads, for example. Some weapons have the double-barreled trait and have to be reloaded twice, but in return you get more power. If you're taking cover, then you can get total cover or partial cover. Partial cover gives you a +1 to reaction rolls made to dodge bullets or other range attacks. For your action, you then must leave cover or suffer -1 to your roll. If you got total cover, then you automatically succeed on any reaction roll to dodge bullets and range attacks, but for your next action, you have to leave the cover or suffer -3 to your next roll. And if you are near to a tall wall or a large obstacle, you can spend an extra critical success to reach that cover, even if you've done something else during your turn. Then you've got the brawl system, about sort of non-lethal, just punching each other, opponents, and only littlings can do this to each other. The opponents can't use any of their traits or moves. All that matters are the opponent's difficulty and their stress boxes. The opponent might choose to either run away, or you can knock them out if they become overstressed, and they will surrender at that point. You never bow out because of a simple brawl. You can become overstressed and give up or gain a condition, but you won't bow out. Then you have duels, which are the mechanic, as I mentioned, the one occasion where the narrator will roll the standard dice, between 4 and 8 of them, depending on the level of the duelist that is opposing the player. They talk about how to set up your attacks and how to endure the counterattacks, and winning and losing, which comes from whenever the challenger suffers 3 jabs, they are defeated. Both you and the narrator can choose to re-roll or go all in, but the narrator never gets any free re-rolls. Whoever rolled lower after the first roll of the dice has the right to re-roll first if they can. And you can also add 3 strong spots or 3 weak spots to the challenger. Strong spots give you +1 to certain action rolls and a -1 to certain others for weak spots. And these should only come to play during duels. Then we have conditions and decorum. So conditions give you hindrances or consequences in some way. These are things that happen when you reach your crucial box or because of certain things that might happen due to opponents' moves or traits. You can be embarrassed, confused, hurt, scared, tired, sick, poisoned, or broken. They all have different effects. So embarrassed gives you -1 in society, for example. Sick means you always have at least 3 stress. If you're poisoned, once per round, you run the risk of suffering 1 stress. And then broken, you get an additional -1 to all your rolls, and your stress cannot go below the crucial box. So getting a condition can be when you fail a roll. When you want to gain a +1, you can choose to suffer a condition to get a +1 if you really need to succeed, or when you reach the crucial box. Removing conditions, so this is more difficult than getting rid of stress in general. So you can remove conditions by making specific rolls, by paying coins, or by interacting with your friends, but you can only remove a maximum of 2 conditions per day. So if you get a whole bunch of conditions at once, you might have trouble. Then they go into each of the different conditions, what they do, and how they are removed. And their general conditions like blinded, drunk, ridiculous, and guilty. So these are less common conditions that aren't typically on the sheet, so that they're not used that often, but they can be used. Then we have decorum. So this is the perception of your elegance by others. And there are 5 levels from uncouth to pompous at the top level. A higher level of decorum can be helpful if you're in amongst the nobles or the upper class. It can be a hindrance if you're amongst the lower classes. And there are ways to lose decorum by failing rolls. You can sacrifice decorum to get +1, like with your conditions, when you lose the requisites for your current level of decorum, or when you choose to lower your decorum. You can also raise your decorum by doing different things listed here. Like if you want to go from shabby to decent, you need to get a bath, buy some new clothes, pay a visit to a barber or hairdresser, and pay 2 coins for that. So there's different things you'll do for each level. They get more complex as you go up the scale. Then we get into contracts. So as I mentioned before, this is the main way you have magic, if you like, in the game. There's always a concession and counterpart of contracts. So the concession is what you gain, and the counterpart is what you offer in exchange. So, for example, for the fairies, hereditary contract, they gain the wings and the ability to fly as a concession, but the counterpart is that if they sign a contract with their name of any kind, they have to keep to that contract no matter what. If they don't, then terrible, terrible things happen. And here they talk about terrible, terrible things. There are different types of contracts. There are the hereditary ones, which are automatic, depending on your folk. Personal contracts, which are stipulated between yourself and a willing force. That's a powerful being representing the forces that play in the house. Or welcoming contracts that you need to gain entrance into specific parts of the house. So they talk about the different hereditary contracts and the commitments you have to your contracts. And then we go in detail into the hereditary contracts. So Starchild for the fairies, Dear to the Hearth for the boggarts, Spark, Drain, and Draft for the sprites. They're 3 different kinds. And here we learn what their different concessions mean: bloating, water retention, stuff like that. The Revenants and Far Beyond. So they have the concession of unbleeding. So they always have a help when rolling to avoid sickness or drunkenness. And in once per session, they can avoid suffering the hurt, poison, sick, or drunk condition, or avoid suffering stress as a consequence of an attack or other physical danger. So that can be extremely useful when things go very wrongly. And we've got some fiction here, and then personal contracts. Again, arachnophobes, beware. Here we see an example of a fairy accepting a contract offered by a golden silk orb weaver. Certain contracts can be made with the forces of the house to give you special abilities, but in turn you'll have to provide something. There are also Argo's legendary contracts. So Argo the bureaucrat was the best and greatest household scholar to ever study the contracts, and some say that he had managed to control the power of contracts, sealing it on a paper surface, and they can still allegedly be found throughout the house. So you can also find contracts just laying about. And they give you some examples of personal contracts you can gain from specific forces, like Wall Strider lets you walk on walls. They're given to you by spiders. Gold Thirst, so the force of cash will give you this, and it means you gain extra riches. Never Heard gives you the ability to be quiet, more stealthy, but you also can't shout or sing, and you always seem to be mumbling. Vainglory is an agreement between the littling and the mirror, so you gain sophistication, which means you can't lose decorum as part of a failure, you don't get dirty, and you never get the ridiculous condition and other stuff, but you also have to have the counterpart of perfection. You always have to prove yourself to everybody else. You always need to put the highest standards on yourself. So then you have your terrible, terrible things. If you fail to uphold the counterpart of a contract, you immediately suffer 1 level of terrible, terrible things, and there are 5 levels. So depending on the level of TTTTs, at the beginning of a session, they'll roll the numeric die, once again, this guy here, and depending on the level of TTT, you'll suffer some kind of consequence. So for example, if you have 3 levels of terrible, terrible things, I rolled a 4, so you take a wrong turn or get separated from your friends and end up facing danger alone right from the get-go. So terrible, terrible things are pretty rough. Now level 5, let's say, I rolled a 5. You're uneasy, your hands shake, and you cannot use free rerolls just at all. And you can continue to suffer terrible things and gain levels in them until you make them stop. So the only way to make them stop is to amend your previous violations by respecting the commitment you ignored, by earning a pardon, or by performing certain superstitious rituals if they're personal contracts. So you have to make amends, basically, and then you can reduce your levels of terrible things. The welcoming contracts, so these are the agreements you have to sign to enter certain domains. So the Upside Down Welcome, this is for guests to Skull Rider and Caliph al-Sahir, Liao the Handsome. He has the power to offer an upside-down welcoming contract. So that means you can walk on the ceiling. However, you have to strap all your clothes and stuff to you or they'll fall down. It only allows you, not your possessions. So you get cobweb harnesses at the entrance, which is adorable. You can tie all your stuff to yourself with the cobweb harnesses. But in return, you can never harm a spider, even in self-defense. And you also may never steal anything. So every realm can have a different kind of welcoming contract. Kindled Welcome is to gain entrance to the Fireplace Hollow. You need permission from the Grim Knight, Edward Ashworth, or from a Cinder Knight appointed by him, for example. And we got equipment and wealth. Your characters have 4 levels of wealth. Basically, when you're poor, you begin the game with 2 coins. If you're middle class, you get 5. Well off, you get 10. And rich, you get 15. And basically, wealth is abstracted. Basically means that you can always afford certain things, depending on your level of wealth. So you can choose your wealth level at the beginning of the game. Most characters should begin as middle class with 5 coins in their pockets. You can choose a different level if it's important to your character's backstory. If they're a noble, maybe they're rich or well off, for example. And if you choose to start off as well off, then you'll need to sacrifice an ace up your sleeve that you'd usually begin with. In exchange, you get a good income and 10 coins. You can raise and lower your wealth as well. Be robbed and lose wealth. You could suffer some kind of economic downfall or lose things in gambling. And so the richer you are, the more you stand to lose and those kind of things. Coins are the abstract unit of currency. So you earn coins by selling items, taking odd jobs, and in corner cases by stealing from others. So there you go. You can also choose to lower your wealth level to instantly gain some coins. So if you go from middle class to poor, you immediately gain 2 coins. If you're rich and lower yourself to well off, you get 10 coins. And then you can use those coins to buy stuff. And then we get loads of cool everyday stuff you can do and buy. So you can buy tents, theater tickets, carriages, carts, backpacks, all that kind of stuff. There are cool gadgets, cobweb bombs, escape helpers, household compasses, battle spinning tops, parachute backpacks, all these kind of cool gadgets. And their price is listed in coins. And then we have weapons, which look adorable. You can fight people with a fork or an old spoon or a key. And there are loads of different melee weapons. We've got some ranged weapons, dueling weapons, and armor and accessories all listed in one table as far as cost goes. The weapons have different traits as well. So firearms, for example, allow you to shoot, but they're very noisy, and you have to reload after every shot. Whereas a pointed melee weapon is helpful to pierce through hard surfaces or to use as a lever. So those traits define the weapon in a sense. Then you got some awesome melee weapons. You can see variety here, like there's a half scissor, various keys, needles, nails, there's a screw. If you want something blunt, lots of cool stuff. And each of them is described and laid out with a beautiful illustration. Range weapons, you have muskets, pistols, precision pistols, crossbows, hunting rifles, and the key skit, which is great. So it's a key that also functions as a gun. They're very, very cool. And there are 2 different types. The heavy key skit is usable for close combat and can deal heavy damage. And then the long key skit is best suited for use at a distance. So that's a unique category of weapon, as well as the dueling weapons. You have needles, pins, lancetta, which are sort of flat dueling swords, or the dueling half scissor, which we can see here. And it describes each of them in detail and what kind of character might use them. Then you have your accessories, so buttons, coins, capes, cloaks, spools can turn a needle into a longer range weapon, essentially. Bayonets, they can be fixed on a musket or rifle for close-up combat. And you get different kinds of armor. Then we got the history of the household, which I won't go into. It's more fun to learn this stuff in game or by reading for yourself. Again, we have tons of beautiful illustrations of key NPCs, backgrounds of previous wars, key battles, a littling ship going down due to a swan. Swans are jerks, that is true. And we've got background of the High Council, and then Saga. So this is how we run the longer term campaign. So the basic idea of Household is that it's in Volume 1, it's set during the Fragile Peace. There are 5 years after the formation of the High Council of the Four Folks. There's a fragile peace that continues until the end of that 5 years when the shadow of a new war starts. And that's where your saga kind of comes in. And they talk about how to structure your saga into what they call paragraphs. Each chapter represents roughly one in-game year and will open up with some kind of key historical event. Every paragraph is a single adventure, and they take place within the larger chapters. And each paragraph could be one or more gaming sessions. So paragraph's not necessarily just one session. And they talk about how to grow your characters, how the perspectives will change as characters grow through different experiences, epilogues for your characters, so that brings your whole adventure to a close, and you want to make sure they're truly memorable, of course. How to play with few or many players. They give you some ideas to adjust if you have just a player and narrator. And a player setting off on an adventure alone can always rely on the support and protection of 2 animal characters. For more than 5 players, then you would want to play more sessions within each paragraph. That way every character has a chance to do something noteworthy and give them opportunity to advance, and it's more gratifying for them. Then we have historical events laid out, 2 different chapters, and then we have the advancement system. So there are 4 types of experiences you can have: an achievement, where you did something; a scar, where you suffered something; a bond, where you bonded with something; and a reputation, where you earned a bad or good reputation for some reason. And when you gain these experiences, I'll give some examples here, then you should have at least 1 experience every chapter, but you can always have more. And experiences should go to the character who's the protagonist of the scene, so the one who's having the most kind of face time. And then your character growth. So when you advance to another chapter, you immediately gain 2 skill points. You place them in any skill. And additionally, you learn a new move of your choice from those for your profession in chapter 2 and 4. If it's chapter 3 and 5, you learn a new trait instead. And an animal handler could use either new traits for themselves or for the animal companion. Memories. So these memorable experiences, they have the same values and experiences and can be called into play when they're helpful or hindering. The only difference is that memories don't get forgotten or erased. They'll be with you for the entirety of the saga. And so they give you a little table here to remind you of your character growth for each chapter of a saga. Now we have the background of the house. So we have a lovely image of the outside, which we saw on the Opera Omnia box. Then we have the atlas, which we looked at earlier. Different lands of the household, the entry hall. They put in boxes some key aspects of these areas, like the in-betweens, which are quite challenging to navigate, short hallways, long hallways, the holidays littlings celebrate during the course of a year. Here we have a picture of the highlight chandelier, so that's where the fairy realm capital is. And you can see sort of plant life and fungus and mold growing since the master's been away. Then we get into the dining hall a bit more detail. I love the details. There's like a giant centipede roaming around, there's a piano where things happen, there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can discover in each area of the house. The table, what's on there? There's a city, key NPCs as well. There's a beautiful picture of Arcadia Obronova, Tsarina of the realm and ruling empress of the household. Wow. She's a big deal. That's why she has very, very fancy dress and gorgeous makeup. And we have the Great Window, which is another part of the fairy realm. Glossburg, the glazed city. And here we have an image of the vast carpet plains welcome us into the living room. And there's the fallen Yule tree. And here we see a littling on mouseback riding his way in. So in the living room, you've got your stairside areas, the carpet plains, the Yule tree, the fog giant. Turns out that might be something other than what people think it is. There's the bookshelf, Walford, the dead mouse den, Brave Spine, so this is another key NPC. Some details about a specific noble family. We've got Cinderhall in the fireplace and the Grim Knight, who we saw earlier mentioned. Here we have the master bedroom, one of the most beautiful rooms of the upper floor. And here we have some interesting places: the Mushroom Thicket, Beddingham, the capital of the Free Dominion, where the sprites rule the day. And here we see them having a great time. There's a cute mouse there as well. There's gangs in Beddingham though as well. Clockminster, located in the grandfather clock. The Vanity. We've got the bathroom. I love this image here. So we've got stuff going on in the sink. We've got the Great Bowl. We've got Naval City in the bathtub. Just great. Tubberdom. I mean, it's just such a hilarious concept to me. Within this single house, they managed to turn it into a whole rich environment. Now we're in the basement, domain of the Slua and spiders and creepy things. Again, very populous major city down there, so not a bad place to be, and tolerant of diversity as well. Here we have Verana of Valetia, the Tsarina below. She's the Dogoressa of Valetia, this one here. And then on the left we have the most splendid Valetia, the city itself. And look at it's like Venice, these lovely canals. They're look to be made out of leaves and stuff. Got mushroom hats, and just the details in these images are just wonderful. And then we have the Caliph's Palace, Liao the Handsome, who is the Caliph of El Sakir, Samarkand, the Upside Down City. You need a contract to get in there, as we saw. Basically, you need to have respect for Spiderkind, as they are the best ceiling walkers around. We have the Khan of the Horde down here as well. The Sawdust Wastes, which are problematic to survive. Then we have the Deep Down, the corner between the Rusted City and the damp region of Dasaware. You'll find the huge metallic mountain known as Deep Down. And, of course, there's a prison there. And in Appendix 1, we have our opponents. So they're general littling opponents, everyday beast opponents, and they talk about the details of how you can tailor opponents to your groups. So a lot of beasts have optional traits that you can use or not use depending, and here are all the traits for the opponents can have are defined. Things like being venomous, large, huge, flying, all that kind of stuff. The weak spot mechanic, how to generate it, and 3 different tables for generating weak spots and how to exploit them. And then we have the listing of opponents themselves. So we've got roaches, they're a basic opponent, and they get a listing here of 6 different reactions, and they just keep coming. Ugh. Even if you think you've chased them off, they might just keep showing up. You got hooligans, they're basic littling opponents. The gendarme, they are police, basically. Their threat level is only 1. Then we have the wasps, another basic opponent, but they can sting you and make a war buzz. That means you can't play aces for any reason, so that's a problem. Earwigs, gross. They can clack their tails, and they can pile on the weakest prey in sight. If the opponent is forced to bow out by that, then they repeat the move, so it's pretty vicious. And you have the centipede, our first level 2 opponent here. They can encircle, crawls around the whole group, and everybody gets -1 to their next reaction roll. We have duelists as well, scouts. They also have the move surround, but these are littlings. We have soldiers, they're critical opponents as well. From now on, characters who fail to roll at least 1 basic success on their reaction turn immediately become tired, and if they're already tired, they become hurt, which is a problem. So that's their storm ability in play. Now we've got the common spider, already a problem. Critical opponent with a decent amount of health to it and some pretty bad attacks. It can also target all characters in rapid succession with its webs. If you don't pass a critical reaction roll in illusion plus war, then you're trapped. Hornets as well. They're like wasps, but even tougher, doing a war buzz, and also it can create dust clouds. Beetles, they can charge and impact you. Got lizards who can tail whip and run away easily. They have some heavier versions of gendarme and soldiers, basically kind of knight level opponents. We've got rats, which we've seen before. Large spiders, which you really don't want. We have tarantulas and wolf spiders, which have different traits. So tarantulas use cobweb and venomous. Wolf spiders have hardened shell and counterattack, and then they have a bunch of different crappy moves that you don't want to suffer from. We've got then honor guards, master duelists, the spurred centipede, which is real bad news. They can circle, slam, or spiral around you. We have golden backs. So these are the most noble and decorated fairies. They get true flight. They fly without limitation and at great speed. So watch out for these dudes. Janissaries, they're another critical opponent. They're the peak of the Horde army. The Cinder Knights, porcelain infantry, are similar for their empires. Then we got the golden silk orb weaver. So it's an exotic beast from the far beyond. So they've been around for a long, long time, and they string golden web. The most famous orb weaver in the house is called Mammon, and they can give you the gold thirst contract. We also have the net casting spider. Again, really bad game for arachnophobes. Can't stress that enough. They can do cobweb traps, which are problematic if you don't see them coming. Then we have huge opponents, which get 2 pages and effectively are 2 opponents in 1. So the giant centipede, you fight its tail and the body, and they each have their own sets of reactions and moves. The tail can do encircle, slam, slap, things get serious. The centipede's body can do a grand slam. The huntsman spider is another one. So you have his legs and you have his body as separate things. The huntsman spider's body can do a cobweb storm, which will basically trap you if you don't pass an extreme reaction roll, which is really tough. And they can stomp their huge legs. You need a critical to pass, and you then fall to the ground. Yeah, so huntsman spiders are a bad deal. And then in Appendix 2, we have our introductory adventure, Pride, Prejudice, and Centipedes. And you can imagine from the title what might be involved here, but I'll just quickly flip through. Then we have our character sheets, extended character sheet, which has 2 pages to it, and a warm farewell from the alleged author of the book. So that's the core of Household. Obviously a lot going on in there. The other books, since they're mostly lore, and the others, one is lore and one is campaign, I'm just going to skim through these so you can admire the artwork and the beauty at play here, rather than talk too much more about the contents. So this is a guide to living in the household. It's about just over 200 pages. What's nice here is that it introduces some key NPCs, some new game options, including a couple of vocations, and a new animal companion, the snail, and then you've got a household atlas, which is a detailed atlas of each part of the house. So with the basic core rulebook, you can play the game and make up the details, but this book really fleshes out the house as a setting, which is wonderful. It goes by the folk and their areas. So first the realm, then the hearth, and the free dominions, and the horde, then your various appendices. So again, there's a lot of mysteries in the household, interesting places to go and people to meet. So I will try not to spoil too much, just show you the realm shows you how it extends here through the dining hall and the kitchen, and its relative location in the house. Politics in the realm, key families, key NPCs we can see here. Fey nobility, another lovely picture here. The famous painting Lady with a Bumblebee, beautiful. And then we've got the Zlat of Wallachia, and all kinds of interesting stuff here. Armed forces of the realm, more details on that. Military handlers, more about the Golden Backs, who are listed as potential foes in the core rulebook. The Royal Gendarmerie, the Royal Guard. A lot of detail on, the historical aspects, life in the realm as well. Things like birthdays, weddings, ceremonies, fashion, funerals, just everything about everyday life that you need to know. Institutions of the realm. Here we have important places that you might want to visit to engage with different aspects of the fairy realm. And then some key NPCs that run these institutions. Some general traits of the kitchen and what you can find elsewhere under the burners, the sink, the pantry, the fridge. Then we get into the hearth. So here we can see the domain of the hearth overall, which includes the fireplace, cinder hall, Chesterfield, Bookshire, the Yule Forest, and the bottom of the stairs. General politics again. So you'll see there's a similar pattern to each section, but you really get a sense that all of these cultures are really distinct, and all of the aspects that make them distinct are really well fleshed out in the book, both visually and in terms of historical notes, details of daily life bits. Things like military service. Here we have a bit about religion in the hearth. The Cinder Order. So these are got some cool knights with armor strapped on here. We got a household mystery. So these are like adventure hooks. Then we have Life in the Hearth, which includes various different ceremonies as well, like the other section. Fashion and institutions. So some fencing, dens, places to get hunting contracts. The Dead Mouse Den, the Knights of the Carpet, Hunters and Handlers, and there's the Union. So this is another aspect of the political aspects of the hearth. Duncan Rox's gang, so got some organized crime. The City in Between, so another household mystery. Now the Free Dominions, this is the land of the sprites. So they cover quite a big area of the upper floor here, from the top bridge up the stairs. Benningham, Clockminster, the small bedroom. But remember that the Free Dominions encompass actually 3 different backgrounds, effectively. So it's an interesting kind of conglomerate of a state with the Sylphs, Undines, and so forth, salamanders. Talk about Tubberdom, which is the wonderful city floating in the bathtub. Bathlantis, household mystery. I mean, how great is this? The creativity and sort of tongue-in-cheekness, some of the stuff is just great. The institutions of the freedoms, universities, Tubberdom University, that's where I want to go. Close to the sea, as such as it is. Dens in the Dominions, arts and theater. Here we have a famous salamander actor called Raycroft Finton. Fencing in the Free Dominions. Here we see somebody using a spool to great effectiveness. We got tailor shops, gentlemen clubs, mechanical wonder, which is another mystery. Daily life in the Free Dominions, with some illustrations of fashion, which are pretty cool. Argo's legacy. So here's the guy, the great bureaucrat who supposedly mastered contracts. Details about what else you can find in the smaller bedroom. The dollhouse. Then we get into the lands of the horde. So here we're down in the basement. Spiders everywhere. You go down the quivering stairs. You'll run first into Umbral, then the great city of Valetia. Also here on the table, the deep down, the sawdust desert, the bucket, which is a wetter area, and the furnace. Lots going on down here as well. There are 5 provinces. Got the Skull Riders, 27 Skull Riders, and their sort of family tree, it looks like. And the hierarchy that links them. Got the spider cult. Interesting. So yeah, spiders are a big deal down here. Got courtiers and witches. Pretty cool. Living in the Horde. Fashion in the Horde. Takes some inspiration from the Middle East, the Near East. The Forgotten One, a household mystery, another adventure hook. And there's a scorpion, extreme opponent. Careful of that. Armed forces of the Horde. And we have the Valetian Guard, Scraps and Mamluks, Janissaries of the Great Blade, and the Black Legions. We get to elite warriors. We have institutions like the Mirandola Academy, Dens in the Horde, Assassins. It's a very cool picture. Demetra the Earring, a freed scrap. We have the Medjay. They are old artists of the dueling cog, do not impart their knowledge easily onto others, but are revered by everyone like heroes or monks of an ancient faith. The Spider Convent, that's another mystery. Swarm of spiders, oh dear. Yeah, my wife would not enjoy this game as a ardent arachnophobe. Then we got our new game options. So we've got new vocations for all the professions, basically. So we got warriors for soldiers, adepts for scholars, blue flames for hunters, bandits for criminals, medjays for duelists, and the new animal companion, just a snail, which is great. You can hide stuff in its shell. You can use its slime as medicine. You can pull random stuff out of the snail, or you can use it to help you retreat. The snail itself is helpful to push or pull objects and to hide things inside the shell. You gain a free re-roll for all rolls that involve the snail, so long as you have a lot of time on your hands. If somebody scares or threatens the snail, roll a die, and if you roll a diamond, they will ignore all your orders and hide in the shell, refusing to come out until the danger passes. Then we got some new characters. So we got Achilles the Fairy, Soldier, Baron Hargrave, the Boggart Scholar, Adept, May Song, Sylph Sprite Hunter of the Blue Flame vocation. We have Alexandrine Regret, a fairy criminal with a bandit vocation. We've got Vega Voncade, I don't know, a Sprite Salamander of the duelist profession with the Medjay vocation. We have Petrolio, a Slua, an animal handler, and a traveling merchant from the Free Dominions. And then we have the Atlas. So here we have detailed images of key parts of the house. So we have the city of Astravia and the chandelier. Astravia low lights on the tables. And key locations are highlighted. Then we have Walford over here. And we have Chesterfield and the sofa. We've got Beddingham, which is on the bed in the master bedroom. We have Tubberdom in the bathtub. So we've got all the stuff hanging around the edge, and the whirlpool over the drain. There's a faucet, of course. Sponge Island. I mean, how great is that? And then we got Al Sakir down in the basement with the Arabic flavor. And Veletia, the great city, in the basement. And there you go. That's the guide to the house. There's so much cool setting detail in there. So really, if you're going to get this game, I really recommend just going all in and getting the Opera Omnia set, because along with that great amount of detail, you have this fantastic campaign. Again, we're just going to purely skip right through this because I don't want really any spoilers. Let's see if there's a table of contents somewhere. Yes, so, I mean, it's 200 pages of adventure, and it brings you through the whole 5 years of the Fragile Peace with loads of stuff happening, and it gives you a historical timeline. I love this logo here for the Household Historians Club. Got a timeline here, noteworthy characters, of which there are many, and I think I showed you one, actually, as my sample character sheet. But, you know, we'll skip through pages here and there. Each of the characters fully fleshed out with prologues and equipment, everything that you would need. They can be playable, they can be NPCs, and as you can see, there's a whole bunch of them. Got nice, lovely, thick backstories for those of you who like that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of noteworthy characters here. Then we have your adventures in the saga. So here we get into the actual story. How it's all organized, which is demonstrating who's involved in what. Got introductory adventures in chapter 1. I'm just doing a few pages at a time just to skip around and show you some cool art. Something about an epidemic. Here we have a illustration of a physician's kit with various little bits and bobs. Here's the beetle friend of Zera called Kalkan. Got cool locations coming up, militia stations, prisons, the case of the missing bumblebee. Really adorable illustrations going on here. There's hospitals to visit, soap bubbles, valets, the grand hotels, stolen shipments, so I presume you'll end up traveling all throughout the house here with ships being involved. You must be in Tubberdom. There's some wasps to deal with, puddles, goldwing hunters, the blue rat, Bucket's Gymnasium with the adorable mouse. And the blue rat, guard mice. There's the horrible Spider of Death, which is on the jam screen. Actually, that's a nice full page. Get more around the edges, essentially, and the jam screen is kind of cropped sort of roughly here. So it gives you a little bit of a sense of scale and movement towards the front, which I like in the full-size version. Then we got more things happening. Tragedy on the Banister. We got more paragraphs here. So as you get further in, you get sort of more open structures to what's happening, whereas the introductory adventures give you a lot of detail. Here you can kind of jump into different adventures, different things. And yeah, we'll keep flipping through. There's diplomatic incidents. We've got the Spider Cult, chapter 4. No, this is chapter 4, sorry. Yeah, there's a very spooky silhouetted image of a big spider. Yeah, so we have all these kind of short one-page adventure summaries. And so by this point, they imagine that you, as a storyteller, will be able to glean all you'll need from this stuff and your knowledge of the setting to put together some fun adventures. And the system is so easy to pick up, and it's so enjoyable to read and think about that I think it's really a pleasure to game master this game. Then we have the epilogue, which I definitely don't want to spoil, so we'll skip all that. And there you go. So that is Household Volume 1 in its complete glory. Now, I strongly recommend this game in every possible way. I love the system. The Director's Cut system, which powers this and Outgunned, I think is really wonderfully designed. It's elegant, it's easy to understand, but it has a lot of little tweaks and interesting stuff that you can do to make your time with it more interesting. So nothing at all to complain about there. The look of the books is fantastic. They've got lovely silk bookmarks. They come in a wonderful case. The dice are, lovely in their construction. The numeric dice is very handy. I love using the dice and matching the suits visually rather than just using numbers. It's much more fun. The dice bag, which I haven't mentioned yet, actually, is really nice and embroidered. So it looks quite fancy. It's going to last a long time. It's properly made. You got your Aces decks as well. So the Omnia set will get you all of that in one go. And then with the backer kit campaign going on now, you get the Household Part 2, which, as I said, opens up the garden and the outside of the house, basically, the backyard and other locations, plus new colossal creatures, new animal companions, new vocations, new equipment, new all kinds of stuff. So really looks fantastic. Plus it comes with new green dice and a green case to fit the sort of garden and spring theme of this expansion, if you like. And the effective seasons is a big deal, obviously, outside the house, so that'll be a big part of the gameplay and the campaign, from what I understand. So definitely I recommend checking out Household. It's also been converted into 5e rules, which is called Adventures in the Household for 5e. You can buy that the same way you can buy Household, by going to Studio 2 Publishing and buying direct, but I personally prefer using the Director's Cut system. I mean, it was built for this game. I think it sings with this game, and I'm just not a huge fan of twisting D&D into shapes it's not really meant to be in. D&D for me is more high magic and combat and tactically focused. Household to me benefits because of its rich lore and background and focus on things like decorum and eloquence and all this stuff. I want a system that supports that much more than the native D&D system does, which has a lot less kind of built-in social rules and relies much more on combat and tactical action. That's not to say those things are bad. I enjoy a tactical role-playing experience as much as anyone, and in particular I prefer older versions of D&D, but I played a lot of D&D in my life, so don't take that as a non-endorsement of the D&D playstyle in general. But for Household, because you're dealing with these rich cultures and the skill spread in the Director's Cut version is so nicely thought out, I think it just works really, really well with this system, and I would get the original Household in the purple box, not the yellow one. And of course, the current backer kit is for Household Volume 2 in the original rule set. They will convert it to 5e at a later point, but the first appearance of Part 2 will be in the original Director's Cut system. So that's another reason to learn the game in that format. Overall, I think it's one of the most beautiful sets of books I have in my vast collection of RPGs. It's really enjoyable to play. The PDFs are all really well done. I mean, just from top to bottom, the service the company provided when I was missing my dice was exemplary, even though there's only 2 full-time employees and 1 contracted artist, which is incredible. So yeah, I mean, I've never so far been disappointed by Two Little Mice, and I hope the trend continues. And I'm very much looking forward to Part 2. So I hope that helped you decide whether Household is for you. As per usual, I talk for a really, really long time because I talk for long long time about things that excite me, and Household is definitely one of those things. So if you're interested in a game with a bit of a magical touch, a bit of interesting sort of lore and history in a very fantastical and sometimes very humorous setting with loads of interesting politics and lore to it, this is definitely the game for you. And it's great for just adventuring, getting into trouble, getting into social and physical challenges and scrapes. Yeah, strongly recommend it. And if you enjoy it, then definitely check out the backer kit for Volume 2. If you already have Volume 1, or if you want to get everything in one go, you can do that, or you can just buy Part 1 during the current backer kit campaign as well. You don't have to buy Part 2. They have a pledge level for just buying the Opera Omnia set that I've just shown you. Bear in mind, the typical Opera Omnia set only includes one set of dice. I got 2 because they were nice to me for making a mistake with the initial shipment. But that's all you need, because you never can roll more than 9 dice anyway, and you only need 1 numeric dice for occasional rolls. So anyway, enough gabbling. It's a great game. Go and get it. Enjoy it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. If you're backing Part 2, let me know what you're looking forward to the most. I'm really looking forward to the colossal creatures and trying to make bargains with them, and the new dangers that will be out there due to the season. So I want to hear more about that. I think the campaign's going to be great, and having a third book in the set that's just an art book will be amazing, because the art throughout this game is phenomenal. Yeah, let me know what you think, and I hope this was informative. If you've got any more questions about the game, ask me in the comments as well. I'd be happy to answer. In the meantime, I hope you all take care, stay well. I look forward to seeing you in the comments below and in our next video as well. So please do hit like and subscribe on your way out. Help me get close to 1,000 subscribers. If you want to support the channel, do use the Ko-fi link below. If you have some money to spare, that always helps me out. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care, and bye-bye.